Welcome to From the Quarries. Tonight's video is The Officers of a Lodge. It's an anonymous lecture from sometime in the 1980s, I presume, which goes through each of the different officers in the lodge and talks about their roles and the symbolism behind them. Thanks to Brother Poole for requesting this topic in the comments, and I hope you enjoy it.
Good evening, and welcome to tonight's presentation, From the Quarries, an archive of Masonic lore.
There are two classes of office in a Masonic lodge, progressive and administrative or advisory. The officers deemed to be progressive, from most junior to senior, are Tyler, Inner Guard, Junior Deacon, Senior Deacon, Junior Warden, Senior Warden, and finally Worshipful Master. The administrative officers, in order of seniority, are Chaplain, Treasurer, Secretary, Director of Ceremonies, Almoner, Organist, and Steward. All of these offices are filled by brethren elected to them by their peers. The office of immediate past master, which could be called progressive by some, regressive by others, but generally as a haven of relief, he hopes, for the incumbent, is the only office held in a lodge that belongs to that brother by right. Each officer in a lodge wears a collar, to which is attached a jewel peculiar to that office. He is stationed at a particular point within the precincts of the lodge room, the sole exception being the Tyler. These stations have not been picked at random, but have been so placed for symbolic reasons. So King Solomon was king over all Israel, and these were the princes which he had: Azariah, the son of Zadok the priest, Elihoreph and Ahiah, the sons of Shisha, scribes, Jehoshaphat, the son of Ahilud, the recorder, and Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was over the host, and Zadok and Abiathar were the priests, and Zabud, the son of Nathan, was the principal officer and the king's friend, and Ashishah was over the household, and Adoniram, the son of Abda, was over the tribute. Thus it is written in the first book of Kings, chapter 4, verses 1 to 7. It is from this passage of Scripture that, according to some Masonic traditionalists of the late 19th century, some of the officers of a lodge derived their origin. The Worshipful Master. The Worshipful Master of a lodge represents Solomon, king of Israel, and the rising sun. He is seated in the east. Reason for this may be found in the lecture on the first tracing board, from which we are taught that learning originated in the east, and it is the duty of a worshipful master to employ and instruct the brethren in Freemasonry. The master wears, as a distinguishing jewel, the square. The square, as worn by the worshipful masters of this jurisdiction, is one having legs of equal length. It should not bear any marks or embellishment, as it is supposedly the trying square of a stonemason, and not an instrument for measuring length. While the latter statement should be adhered to, the former is incorrect. The legs of the square should be of the ratio of 3:4, with the longer side hanging straight down. Squares of this sort can be seen in lodges under the Irish Constitution. This arrangement is sometimes called a gallows square, but to anyone versed in Freemasonry or geometry, it will quickly be realized that these dimensions form the 3-4-5 right-angled triangle, the secret of which, according to some Masonic writers, was that lost upon the death of Hiram Abiff. This secret was known by the ancient Egyptians, and many scholars believe that this secret was communicated to the Jews by Joseph after his triumphant return to the land of his father. The origin of our square with equal legs dates from the time of the formation of the Grand Lodges of England and Scotland and the adoption by the Masons' Company of London's arms as part of their own. Symbolically, the square is equated with morality, truthfulness, and honesty. A full description of the Masonic symbolism of the square is found in the lecture of the Second Degree Working Tools. The Senior Warden. The Senior Warden represents Hiram, King of Tyre, and the setting sun. He is seated in the west, for it is here that the teaching from the east bore fruition. The Senior Warden is the first officer to be obligated and invested by the Worshipful Master, and is the second officer of the lodge. The jewel connected with his office is the level, which represents fraternal equality, and its Masonic symbolism is likewise found in the second degree. The Junior Warden. The third member of the principal officers of the lodge is the Junior Warden. His place is in the south, and he represents Hiram the widow's son, or Hiram Abiff. He also represents the sun at its meridian, or highest altitude. The jewel worn by this officer is the plum rule, representing uprightness and integrity, and, like the previous two, its Masonic symbolism is fully explained as a second-degree working tool. The symbolic positioning of the principal officers. It must be remembered that lodges in Australia, or for that matter the Southern Hemisphere in general, are based on those of the Northern Hemisphere. The sun, in the northern half of the world, travels across the southern sky, and thus shade is found in the north. In order, therefore, never to cast a shadow on the light of Freemasonry and knowledge, the Junior Warden is placed in the south. Strictly speaking, for this same theme to be carried through, in the Southern Hemisphere, the Junior Warden should be placed in the north. The offices of Master and Warden, being the principal officers of the lodge, some other mark was needed to show the superiority of their respective positions. For this reason, it is usual to find in most lodges that the chairs of these officers are raised from above the floor. Thus, the Junior Warden's chair is raised by 1 step, that of the Senior Warden 2, and that of the Worshipful Master is raised by 3 steps. These 3 steps also have a symbolical reference. They, in fact, refer to the 3 principal staves of Jacob's ladder, as portrayed in the lecture of the first tracing board, namely faith, hope, and charity. Faith, in the lodge's choice of Junior Warden, that he will faithfully carry out the duties annexed to his appointment. The hope of the Senior Warden that, by his diligent service, he will advance to the chair of Solomon and maintain an unbroken line of succession, and that the Master will embody the distinguishing characteristic of the order by dispensing charity to the needy and charity to the heart of his brethren. The derivation of the word warden. The name warden is now given to the 2 chief officers, whose duty it is to assist the Worshipful Master in the government of the lodge. The word warden comes from the Anglo-Saxon word weird, meaning watchman. Guard and guardian also stem from this Anglo-Saxon word. Thus the word warden aptly describes the duties of that office, for the Senior Warden is directed to guard the privileges of the brethren and to see that each has his due. The Junior Warden's special duty is to prove visitors and to prevent unqualified people gaining admission to our ceremonies. Officers of the North. Seated in the north of the lodge are 2 of the most important officers of the lodge. They are the Treasurer and the Secretary. There would not be a single organisation in the world that could function efficiently and well without a good Treasurer and Secretary. As most brethren should know, without them the lodge would, most likely, cease to function. The Treasurer. The Treasurer is distinguished by the jewel of his office, which is a key, or a pair of keys, in saltire or crossed. He represents Adoniram, the son of Abda, who was over the tribute, or in more modern parlance, the tax collector. In the old instructions of Freemasonry, the key was an important symbol. In the ceremonies of the first degree in the 18th century, allusion is made to a key by whose help the secrets of Freemasonry are to be obtained, which key is said to hang and not to lie, because it is always to hang in a brother's defence and not to lie in his prejudice. It was said, too, to hang by the thread of life at the entrance, and was closely connected with the heart, because the tongue ought to utter nothing but what the heart dictates. Among the ancients, the key was a symbol of power, and thus, among the Greeks, the title of key-bearer was bestowed upon one holding high office. And with the Romans, the keys were given to the bride on the day of marriage, as a token of that authority of the house was bestowed upon her. Among the Hebrews, the key was used in the same sense and was the mark of office, either sacred or civil. Thus, in Isaiah chapter 22, verse 22, it is said, "The key of the house of David I will lay upon his shoulders, so he shall open, and none shall shut, and he shall shut, and none shall open." It is in reference to this interpretation of the symbol, and not that of secrecy, that the key is the jewel of the treasurer, because he has the purse, the source of power, under his command. The Secretary. The secretary of a lodge represents Jehoshaphat, the son of Ahilud, the recorder. The distinguishing jewel of this office is a pair of pens in saltire. As the minutes or records of the transactions of the lodge should be indelible, pens and not pencils are used. One pen is to record the minutes of the lodge meeting. The other symbolizes correspondence to members and their families in the cases of sorrow or bereavement. The quill of each pen symbolizes the soft feather content of the aforementioned letters. The sharp point symbolizes the firm approach which may be necessary to remind a brother of his obligations. The duties of the secretary are many and varied. There is more to the position of secretary than just reading and writing the minutes and attending to all correspondence. Perusal of a lodge bylaws and the orders and regulations give more detail as to what is required. The north of the secret tradition. Although in some jurisdictions these officers may be seated in the east, below the Worshipful Master, in a manner similar to that of a court of law, the more common practice is that they are placed in the north. Their particular placement in the lodge room is not merely one of convenience, but, as will be shown directly, is one of deep symbolical import. Nor is it a matter of disrespect that these officers do not have to rise from their seats during the entrance of the master, or visiting masters, or during the opening or closing of the lodge. They are accorded this privilege in order that they may conduct their administrative duties whilst the lodge holds its meeting, never forgetting that they are often called upon to take their part in the ceremonies performed. In the secret tradition, the north is the place of the great light of knowledge, and it is from this symbolic direction that the great teachers, or magi, descend upon the earth with their message of mercy to their people. The great light is the glory referred to in Exodus chapter 33, verse 18, when Moses on Mount Sinai said, "I beseech thee, show me thy glory." The north tradition is mentioned by Ezekiel. "Then he brought me by way of the north gate before the house, and I looked, and behold, the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord." As none may truly look upon the face of God, so it is said that the north is veiled or hidden in darkness. The treasurer and secretary may thus be regarded as the guardians of the north gate, and that the true significance of the secretary is that he is the recorder of the thoughts, the words and deeds of all who aspire to ascend Jacob's ladder, and that the treasurer is the keeper of the treasure of their virtues. The cycle of life as depicted in a lodge room. If we travel within our lodge room, starting from the east, we begin with the rising sun. Arriving at the south, we encounter the noonday sun, and in the west, the setting sun. Darkness or night is found in the north, from which we emerge once more to the welcoming rays of the dawn in the east. Looking at this another way, we are born in the east, which as Freemasons we acknowledge with every new initiate, reach the summit of our youth and prowess in the south, mature and gain wisdom in the west, die in the north, and are resurrected in the east. This is of a special significance, for as Freemasonry was initially restricted to Christians, this symbolically represented the birth, life, death, and the resurrection of Christ. With the reformation of the craft, whereby recognition of a supreme being became the qualification, the retention of this symbolism is still appropriate, as it is inculcated in many of the world's religions. This is the reason behind our clockwise movements around the lodge room, and also why the Worshipful Master and Wardens should always enter and leave their respective stations in the same manner. The Deacons. The first of the assistant officers of the lodge are the Deacons. They are the messengers or servants of the Worshipful Master and the Senior Warden. Their title exactly describes the duties they have to perform. The word deacon is derived from the Greek diakonos, meaning servant. The word was first used ecclesiastically in the church, and in this sense, a deacon is an assistant to the priest. The part taken by the deacons in the preparation of and attendance upon candidates for the various degrees corresponds generally to their function as assistants in church services, or in the wider meaning of chapel government. According to tradition, the senior deacon is the representative of Solkan, an attendant on Hiram, king of Tyre, and the junior deacon of Izabred, an attendant on Hiram Abiff. The Inner Guard. The Inner Guard traditionally represents Zerbel, a watchman at the eastern gate of the Temple of King Solomon. His title is self-explanatory, and his duties include the responsibility for seeing that visitors are properly vouched for, that brethren enter the lodge room properly clothed, and that candidates approach the lodge properly prepared. This office developed in the 18th century from that of Inner Tyler or Inner Garda. This office existed in English lodges long before it was honoured with its particular name. In 1734, the Old King's Arms Lodge No. 28 had a doorkeeper, and it is likely that he was the newest entered apprentice present. He was armed with a trowel, upon which arms were collected, especially during what is now recognised as the north-east charge of the first degree. Traditionally, therefore, the jewel of the Inner Guard is a trowel, and that office was initially junior to that of Tyler. In some constitutions, this office is unknown, these duties being performed by the junior deacon. The jewel of the Inner Guards today, a pair of swords in saltire. The Tyler. The Tyler is traditionally said to represent Ahishar, a faithful brother who kept watch for the brethren at Jerusalem. The duties of the Tyler entail the responsibility of the preparation of candidates and prevention of any unqualified person from gaining admission to or eavesdropping on our ceremonies. The origin of the word Tyler is considered to be uncertain. One theory is that it is taken from the word entailer, which was the name given to a craftsman who performed a specialized carving work on pinnacles or spires, and used different tools to those employed by stonemasons. It most certainly does not derive from the word tiler, as in roof tiler. Terracotta tiles and the profession, imported from France into England, came long after the establishment of the Masonic office. There is one explanation, however, which is very seldom heard about. There is an ancient Celtic word which means guardian. That word is tailf, which is still used by those who practice the ancient religion of the Druids. A variation of the word, with a similar meaning, is also found among the Basques. The tiler is entrusted with a sword as an implement to assist him in his duties. It is also the jewel of his office. Although in most modern lodges the sword is of ordinary form, it should, however, be wavy in shape, in allusion to the flaming sword which was placed in the east of the Garden of Eden, which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life. It was, of course, without a scabbard, because the tireless sword should ever be drawn and ready for the defence of his post. The Steward. Stewards are generally the labourers of the lodge and are under the supervision of the Junior Warden and the Deacons. The jewel worn by them is the cornucopia, or the horn of plenty. According to Greek mythology, Zeus was nourished during his infancy in Crete by the daughters of Melissus with milk from the goat Amalthea. When Zeus came to the empire of the world, in gratitude he placed Amalthea in the heavens as a constellation. He gave one of her horns to his former nurses, which would, forever, furnish them with a never-failing supply of whatever they might desire. Hence it is the symbol of abundance, and as such has been adopted by Masons as the jewel of the steward, to remind them that it is their duty to see that the tables are properly furnished at refreshment, and that every brother is suitably served. The stewards are also charged to assist the deacons and other officers in the performance of their duties. The wands or staffs that they carry are symbols of their authority over the rest of the brethren. It is perhaps unfortunate that, in the passage of time, the steward has suffered a loss of precedence and prestige, for in pre-Union days, the steward in modern lodges commonly ranked next to the secretary, and the office was considered to rank higher than that of deacon. Not until the word itself is closely studied do we realize the historical significance and importance of the office. The second syllable of the word is ward, which has already been explained, means guardian or watchman. The first syllable is a corruption of the word sty. Therefore, the full and original meaning of the word steward is pig guard. This may seem to some to be rather demeaning, but in fact it is quite the opposite. As cattle were, and still are, a mark of a man's wealth in Africa and Asia, so in Europe a man's wealth was determined by the number of pigs he kept. The steward was then a man entrusted with a large responsibility, and the position of a steward today is of no less importance than that of the manager of a large estate. The Organist. An essential but much forgotten office is that of organist, without whom our ceremonies would be sadly lacking in colour, harmony, and character. His duty is to provide music suitable for our ceremonies, and his talents often provide light-hearted moments in our otherwise formal engagements. In some constitutions, he may work in conjunction with a director of music or a choir master. Much as we delight in listening to a good organist, sadly, a number of jurisdictions not only do not have such offices, but absolutely forbid the sound of music or harmony in their assemblies. In all constitutions other than the Irish, the jewel worn by the organist is the lyre. That of director of music or choir master is the same, but surmounted by a baton. The lyre was the most important stringed musical instrument of classical Greece, known from the Sumerian period onward. It was the instrument played by David and by the Jewish captives in Babylon. The Greeks attributed its invention to Hermes, who struck sounds from the dried cartilages of a tortoise shell that he picked up from the banks of the Nile. In the Irish constitution, the jewel is the Irish harp, which is, of course, a national emblem. The Chaplain. The chaplain is the first officer to be invested after the wardens. In our Grand Lodge, as in a number of other constitutions, the dictates that this office must be fulfilled by a clergyman. However, if one is not to be found within the lodge, then a brother who is deemed worthy may act in that capacity. The duty of the chaplain is to offer up prayers and invocations to the great architect of the universe. He represents Azariah, the son of Zadok, the priest who attended upon King Solomon. His jewel is the volume of the sacred law within a triangle, the whole surmounting a glory, that same glory that has previously been mentioned. In most lodges, the chaplain sits at a lectern in the southeastern corner of the lodge room. On this lectern rests a copy of the volume of the sacred law. In some lodges, the lectern itself is of a special design, the volume of the sacred law appearing to be supported by the outspread wings of an eagle. There are two main reasons why this design is important to us as Freemasons, and both relate to the early Christian influence in the craft. The first is to remind us of the presence of God at all our assemblies. For as he said to the Israelites of old, I bare ye on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. The second refers to St. John the Evangelist, one of the patron saints of our order, whose emblem is the eagle. The Almoner. In this jurisdiction, but not necessarily in others, the Almoner sits with the chaplain. He is the representative of Elihoreph, one of Solomon's scribes. His duties include visiting the sick and distressed, and to make recommendations to the lodge for relief of those distressed brethren or their families. He may also advise the lodge on charitable contributions to be made to other worthy causes. In some constitutions, this officer is filled by a member of the medical or nursing profession. The jewel of the almoner is a scrip purse, upon which is a heart, for as brotherly love and relief are cornerstones of the Masonic structure, so the almoner should seek out members and dependents of deceased members whose circumstances warrant assistance. The Director of Ceremonies. This officer has a most important function to perform. To him falls the responsibility of ensuring that our ceremonies are carried out with decorum, as well as to the instructions set out by Grand Lodge. Thus will our ritual convey to the candidate, as well as to ourselves, those important lessons that it has been designed to do so. He is also responsible for the correct placement of visitors and brethren within the lodge, according to rank. The jewel of his office is 2 rods in saltire. He is also entrusted with a baton, the emblem of his authority. In other constitutions and in other orders of Freemasonry, this officer may bear the title of Marshal. This particular office in state affairs is very ancient. It was found in the court of the Byzantine empires and was introduced to England at the period of the Norman conquest. His badge of office, then as now, was a rod, which was known as a verge, hence the office of verger in church government. For convenience, this staff of office, similar to that carried by our deacons and stewards, became the little baton with which we are all familiar. The rod has, in all ages, and yet doth amongst all nations and amongst all offices, signify correction and peace. For by correction follows peace. Wherefore the verge or rod was the ensign of him which had the authority to reform evil in war and peace, and to see quiet and order observed among the people. The immediate past master. The final office to receive our attention is that of immediate past master. As has been previously stated, his is the only office not won by election, nor gained by appointment thereto. It is his by right, having faithfully and zealously carried out the performance of his duty as Master of the Lodge. His role is that of an advisor to the Worshipful Master, passing on his newly won experience to his successor. The jewel of the immediate past master is suspended from a square, the representation of Euclid's 47th proposition, more commonly known as Pythagoras' theorem, which, when stated correctly, is: in any right-angled triangle, the square which is described upon the side subtending the right angle is equal to the squares described upon the sides which contain the right angle. Some Masonic writers claim that this knowledge and the 3-4-5 system of constructing a right-angled triangle which is deduced from it was the secret known to only 3 persons: Solomon, king of Israel, Hiram, king of Tyre, and Hiram of Bith, and that each carried a staff, one of 3, one of 4, and the other of 5 cubits in length. It is interesting to note that this last is maintained by the Worshipful Society of Freemasons, or operatives. Pythagoras, it is said, was so elated after making this discovery that he made the offering of a hecatomb, or a sacrifice of 100 oxen, to the gods. The devotion to learning which this religious act indicated in the mind of the ancient philosopher induced Freemasons to adopt the problem as a memento, instructing them to be lovers of the arts and sciences. Conclusion. In most constitutions, it is necessary for the Worshipful Master, Treasurer, and Tiler to be elected annually by a ballot of some form. In others, all offices are declared vacant at the meeting prior to the installation, and brethren are elected on that night for the ensuing year. They are then invested at the installation meeting. If a member declined office, including that of Worshipful Master, it was common, in many old lodges, for that brother to be fined. The amount determined by the office refused, and in no case would that fine be inconsequential. The officers of a lodge carry an enormous burden, one that increases with every promotion. An officer should not only carry out those duties specific to his particular office whilst in the precincts of the lodge, but practice those duties that he has solemnly promised to do, by doing his utmost to forward the interests of the lodge and to support the Worshipful Master in his various duties. Not only do new and greater responsibilities come with each promotion, but rewards are also increased, not those of financial or material gain, but spiritual rewards, until rising to eminence by merit, one may live respected and die regretted.
For more Masonic podcasts, videos, music, texts, and artwork, visit fromthequarries.com or subscribe to our YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook accounts by searching From the Quarries.